Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Article Club. I'm Mark, and Melinda's back. Hey, Melinda.
Hi, Mark. So glad to be back.
It's so great to be back with you. And we just came out of a discussion. So before we dive into this month's article, Melinda, we just did a discussion and it was pretty good. What do you think?
It was great. We met in small groups, talked about this compelling and shocking article about IVF and IVF mix up. It was wonderful to be with everyone and hear their thoughts and their feelings. I love sharing space with everybody.
It was really great. And it was really wonderful also. So we went from the Zoom discussion, which with people from Italy, by the way. So like
Yes.
international and national. And then I haven't even told you, Melinda, but then we had HHH, in Oakland. Sorry that you couldn't make it. That would
Oh
be
my
nice.
gosh. That's my 2025 vision for myself and Article Club.
But
Us
what was really,
together.
yeah, but what was really cool is that in person, people kept talking about that article.
Oh, I
And
love that.
yeah, there was something about that article that just really resonated and also got a
Hmm.
lot of men to unsubscribe, by the way. Like a lot of men
Fascinating.
unsubscribed. But anyway, that's another topic.
That's, yeah, another day to
Yeah.
unpack that.
And it's just so interesting. So, like, that article was really big, but
Hmm.
already this one, the new one, the one that we're going to be focusing on this time, is
Hmm.
also getting a huge amount of engagement. I mean, like, people are wanting to talk about this one too. And it's about a topic near and dear to my heart, reading.
Yes.
I think it's
Yes.
all of our topics. Like we're here to read.
We are here to read. This is a community for readers and about reading, where we read and come together.
Yeah, so I really like this article. It is called Is This the End of Reading? And it's by Beth McMurtrie, and it's from the Chronicle of Higher Education. And I have been nervous to put something out like this about reading because
Mhm.
even though I love it, I'm also protective of all the stuff that happens when an article like this comes out. And
Mhm.
it's just people come with all of their random thoughts. And
Mhm.
so we're not going to do that because you and I, Melinda, will just talk about it. But it's going to be really cool just to sort of see what you think about it also, because
Mhm.
this article is generally about college students and like
Yes.
college educators.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because it's about college, wanted to talk a little bit about your experiences and our experiences about
Sure.
reading in college.
Yes. Well, Mark knows this, and maybe a few of you who are listening know this. I was an English major in college. So this hits pretty close to me because obviously I read a lot in college and then I went to law school where I read even more. And something I kept thinking about is when I initially just read the first couple paragraphs of this is when I was in college and I took one of the required courses to be an English major. One of my professors, Michael Levinson at the University of Virginia, opened up the very first lecture of the semester and said, "You all are presumably here because late one night your parents said, 'Turn out the light and stop reading,' and you didn't." I have had that quote on a sticky note on my laptop since 2008. So reading is very, very fundamental to me. And when I was reading this, I thought, oh my gosh, like I graduated college 15 years ago, but it is remarkable to me, which is, a considerable length of time, but it's remarkable to me that the way curriculum has changed and the way that the idea of like, how do we introduce reading? How important is it in college classes? And that it is becoming a smaller slice of the pie where it was so foundational. Even, I mean, obviously as an English major, but I feel like, other people who had other majors, like it was, what's your reading for tonight? How many pages are you reading tonight? How many, are you going to write a term paper? So this was very enlightening to kind of see like where we are now
Yeah,
and how we think about it.
it's definitely not the biggest part of the pie anymore. But like, it's interesting because obviously we're different generations. I'm Gen X and you're millennial. And then this
Hmm.
article is about Gen Z.
Hmm.
But did you ever sort of in college, did
Right.
you ever sort of question the idea of whether reading was fundamental to your courses?
No. And that is something that is so interesting in this is like it's peeling back a layer that I didn't even think you could peel back because I was like, no, but that's the point. Like
Yeah.
the point is to read and not even like volumes or like different kinds of things or like how many pages, but to be engaged in the reading,
Hmm.
right? Is to like really be immersed in the reading. And there are, I mean, again, to kind of talk about my own experience about being in college, I have very vivid memories of talking about a passage in a work of fiction where three people had very different points of view. And we learned about each other through that, right? We learned about each other as readers. We learned what we picked up on. There's an emotional level that you understand about people in that way. And something I found really interesting in this article is that when reading is becoming more minimized, it doesn't just affect the curriculum, it affects how people understand arguments, how they make their own opinions, and how they feel connected to other people. It's a ripple effect. I don't know if you felt that when you read it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because like I was a history major, and so probably our reading was very different. I just remember not knowing really how to read at that level and exactly like what was going on. I was never taught how to read, which is I think what this piece is also talking about, like this
Agreed.
assumption that you can just assign readings and blame and complain to high school teachers or whatever. I remember second year of college finally figuring out, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So not just
Mhm.
the amount of reading, but exactly what you said, like picking out the argument or like trying to discern and trying to figure out what an author is doing. But it was just basically by luck, I think, over and over again. And also just because I did not assume that there would be any other way to learn it.
Mhm.
Whereas now, obviously, Gen Z is definitely questioning it. What I also like too, though, is that I think that part of this has always been true, and that's sort of maybe a little bit about what this article is about. Like,
Mhm.
these college professors who think that all of a sudden the kids aren't reading, like,
Mhm.
there was always fake reading. Like,
Yeah.
there's always been the dance where the professor or the instructor sort of knows that the student haven't read, and the students sort of, like, perform or fake it.
Mhm.
But what's great about this article is that Gen Z is not lying anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
There's transparency.
they don't care.
That's really funny. I also have vivid memories of people I will not out anybody that I am friends with that was also an English major at UVA, but I do have very specific memories of, like, watching someone flip a page open and read maybe 3 sentences and then, like, formulate thoughts and opinions about that 3 sentences when it was like, "Well, you didn't read those 60 pages that we were supposed to read." Yes, the very refreshing point of view that Beth McMurtrie is sharing here that other articles haven't, which is a reason why you should read this. One of the things that I thought was really interesting that is true and has been true is how students, Gen Z students who are in college, they feel motivated when someone believes in them. And like they are motivated in classes where like professors have taken a particular interest in their success. And when I read that, I was like, well, mentorship is a thing that's always been motivating, right? Like
Yeah.
that is true of both of us, of being in different generations, and then also of Gen Z people who are currently in college and they're like, "Oh, I actually feel motivated to now really be involved and engaged in the reading because somebody else is here motivating me." I don't know if you picked up on that too.
Yeah, I really like that part of, the piece, which is
Mhm.
basically she's saying that so first of all, some of the professors are sort of just meandering and they're stressed out because all of a sudden they have to teach differently. And I'm like,
Right.
well, yeah, you have to teach differently. But also what's cool is that it seems like the author is really getting at we no longer can assume that students are going to quote unquote do the reading. And
Mhm.
so therefore you have to actually care not just
Mhm.
about the person, not just about the student, but also we cannot assume that reading is the thing that must be done. And
Yes.
we actually have to say that reading is worthwhile. What is reading for?
What is reading for, I think, is maybe a question it is definitely answered in the article. Whether or not, Beth McMurtrie did that on purpose, I obviously I do not know, but I think that that's, like, kind of the overarching question. Because I think something that I found really interesting is that whenever I was reading this, I was like, "Oh, we're talking about reading, but now we're also talking about, like, community, and we're talking about identity, and we're talking about what motivates people, what people how they think of themselves inside of like groups that they are a part of or like can they formulate their own opinions, can they respond to opinions that are out there, and that's so far beyond just like did you do the reading for your
Right.
English class.
What I love about the article is that she really gets into all the possible issues and problems,
Hmm.
a little bit far afield at points, meaning I always get nervous when the professors just are nostalgic and they just say, like, all the problems of the world is because people aren't reading. But there's always the heavy hitters, right? There's smartphones, everything 10 years ago is the cause for all the problems now. So it's either smartphones.
True at any point in history.
Right. So it's either smartphones or it's COVID or it's all these different things. And I don't know, like I think that's important to talk about, but like we can't really do anything. We can't really do anything about the past.
That's really interesting that you were talking about, like, yeah, it can sometimes make you nervous how far people can go. Because she does go. I mean, she interviews a student and his current experience about, like, and this is an article about reading, of course, but it talks about, like, how he shares, does he find meaning in his classes? Does he feel connected to his other classmates? Like, does he even feel connected to this experience of college? And I was like, "Ooh, this is big." That feels like you were saying, far reaching.
What I like though is that, Beth McMurtrie is like she's just a really dedicated reporter who did the
Mhm.
work. And
Mhm.
I just think it's really interesting, sort of like which things does she put in versus what, like as an actual, like real journalist who has high standards, like what makes it into the piece. And so when I was surprised by some of the things that she put in, I was like, I trust you, go ahead and do that. Versus, if somebody is just sort of doing a hot take about, oh,
Right.
yeah, which I do not appreciate at all.
We do not appreciate that here. Everyone, you can, scroll back a couple issues to see how Mark feels about when people do that. No, I agree. When I was reading it, I read it a couple of times before we hopped on here, and it got me to think critically about, well, what does reading mean to me?
Mhm.
Right? Like, why is it important to me? Why has it been what do I want out of it? How do I think about it in my daily life? Because I think something that also has come up in the article is, like, how professors and educators have had to adapt to the times we are in, right? Like, the younger generations are more visual than we are. They're more auditory than we are. And it made me wonder, like, okay, like, what place does reading have? And an interesting question for folks to ask yourselves too, is like a reflection point of not only are observing a younger generation, but like, what does reading mean to you?
Right, absolutely, because it's so interesting. I would say, again, back 10 years, the same people now who are complaining that folks are not print-based or text-based were
Mhm.
probably also saying, "Oh, reading is everything now. It's more visual." And also the whole debate about audiobooks, don't get me started too. Like,
Okay.
I totally don't care.
Nobody leave anything about audiobooks in the comment
Right.
section of this article, this newsletter. You will trigger Mark.
So, definitely read the article. I think it's going to
Yes.
be, a boisterous discussion. Oh, by the way, we're going to be discussing it on February 23rd, Sunday,
Mhm.
February 23rd at 2 p.m. on Zoom.
Yes.
If you're interested, there'll be information in the post. But also, in addition to the discussion, we're doing this voicemail thing, right?
We are. I'm very excited about this voicemail thing.
Right. I mean, because it's all about community and
Yes.
nostalgia, which is what this article is about too.
Agreed.
Okay, so what are we going to do this time? So people are going to call. Let me tell the number. Okay, you are going to call 415-323-6532. Get that down, 415-323-6532. Because once you call it, there's going to be good things that are happening. And Melinda, what's going to be happening?
So we're going to do this thing where it's a two-way street. You're going to hear me ask Mark, how does he feel about everybody blaming COVID as the reason why people aren't reading anymore? So you're going to hear his opinion and you get to share yours because we want to know how you feel. How do you feel about reading? Why do you think this is this the end of reading? Answer the question that's posed in the title. We want to know.
So, yes, continue the conversation over at the voicemail. We need a title for what this is.
The voicemail corner.
Right.
We're workshopping this, folks. You're hearing this in real time.
But yeah, it'd be really great to hear you over on the voicemail and then also discuss over on February 23rd. What do you think?
Yes. Yes. Please come. It is going to be a wonderful discussion. Again, as we said earlier, it was wonderful to speak in January. And I feel like this article very much feels like for us, right? We are readers. We appreciate reading. We want other people to enjoy reading as much as we do. We want to be in community with fellow readers. So this feels like a match made in reader article club heaven.
Absolutely. And one final thing is Beth McMurtrie. She's wonderful. And she is going to be doing an interview, which you'll hear next week. So be looking for that as well.
Very exciting.
Thank you, Melinda. It's always great to chat with you.
Thanks, Mark.